Hi, everyone. Welcome to Liberty Chats, a new podcast from the Steamboat Institute. My name is Haley Supergan, a member of the Emerging Leaders Council, a leadership program out of the Institute, and I'm so excited to be a part of this podcast today. The Leadership Institute is a conservative organization based out of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and we are dedicated to promoting the values of freedom, liberty, and civil dialogue. Today, our guest is Evita Duffy. Evita is a rising senior at University of Chicago, where she co-founded and is now the managing editor of Chicago Thinker, a student publication for the free exchange of ideas and fact-driven reporting. She is an intern at the Federalist and has written on issues such as COVID, campus culture, and has even been featured in the Wall Street Journal and on Tucker Carlson for some of her work. Evita, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So jumping right in, you are the co-founder and managing editor of the Chicago Thinker. Why don't we just start with you telling us a little bit about how that got started and what it is and how the publication is impacting University of Chicago's campus.
So when I was a sophomore, it was the spring of my sophomore year, I was a part of the U Chicago Institute of Politics, which is a bipartisan organization on campus, and it's run by David Axelrod, which is Obama's former chief advisor. And I was part of this project called I Vote Because, where students would stand in front of a camera, take a picture of themselves with a whiteboard, and it says, I vote because, and then you would write your reason for voting. And the other students wrote, I vote because I believe children should be put in cages. I vote because healthcare is a right. And I wrote, I vote because the coronavirus won't destroy America, but socialism will. And because I wrote that, the photo went viral on campus, and I was made a meme of. People made fun of me. They also, were deeply upset about that I was critiquing socialism, but instead made it about xenophobia and racism and accused me of really horrible things. They even went after my intellect and my character. They even said, I wasn't pretty, and it compared me to animals. And then at one point, I actually received a death threat from one of my students. This is the whole thing just spiraled out of control. And then I decided to write an op-ed in my school newspaper about how the university is not living up to a culture of free speech, because the University of Chicago is very well known for being a pro-free speech campus. But if the student body isn't buying into that, then you can't have free speech because they bully and silence people. And so then there's no open dialogue, and there's really just one prevailing narrative. So after that happened to me, and similar things happened to a friend of mine, Audrey Umberfirth, we both decided that enough was enough. And we started the Chicago Thinker, which is a conservative and libertarian newspaper, which is, there for conservative students to showcase their ideas where, in the past we had actually been afraid to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a brave story of something that seems so simple, like you said, spiraled out of control, but it's incredible how you've taken that and been motivated to promote more free speech and more of those conversations on campus. So it really is inspiring to really Americans around the country. So thank you for, leading the way with that. Kind of going off of that, how has your role with a publication that embraces those unpopular opinions and those ideas of freedom, how has that impacted your college career and your life on U Chicago's campus?
Well, I definitely am more well known than I used to be on campus. Maybe not in a good way. I'm a little bit infamous because the University of Chicago is predominantly a left wing campus, and so we have a personal Twitter hate account, which is for our every story that we write. They have all these terrible things. They make memes about things that we stories that we publish, and so that's been pretty negative. But on the flip side of that, I'd say that the response has also been really positive, where we've had over 30 students wanting to become a part of our team at the Chicago Thinker, and we've had alumni and other students who aren't part of our team, and even professors reach out to us and say, we're so happy that you're doing this. This is super necessary for the University of Chicago. They needed you here. And just even thinking about professors, I mean, that's the most amazing thing is we've had professors reach out to us and say, I'm afraid to say what I think to my students because I don't want to get canceled and I want to lose my job if they don't have tenure. And so that's why exposing left-wing students who might be more intolerant to other ideas, exposing them to these ideas is actually creating more tolerance, because then they're used to seeing us, they're used to hearing us, instead of, being outraged by someone saying they don't like socialism. Now they hear it all the time, and they're more accustomed to more radical points of view, like, if you're vaccinated, maybe you shouldn't have to wear a mask, which is very controversial on our campus right now. So yeah, but it's been really, there's been negative, but there's been a lot of positive things, and I think that it's really changed the University of Chicago for the better.
Yeah, it's incredible how you're saying that it's created a normalization of differing ideas, where you're right, on most college campuses around the country, it is very one-sided. And so working to get some of those ideas into the sphere of thought and those universities and campuses can be really hard. So you're definitely fighting a good fight there. Where do you see the publication going after you graduate? Do you plan to continue to contribute to it, or how do you see it sort of evolving?
So what's so great about the Chicago Thinker is actually that we have a ton of freshmen. We purposely reached out to many freshmen, and there's a lot of really young people on campus that are part of our editorial board that I think would be great candidates to pass it down to. This is not like something that's going to die off when I graduate. Audrey and I, my co-founder, have been preparing to make sure that this is going to be something that stays on campus and continues. And so it's been awesome, and I think that it's gonna be something that will be institutionalized on campus. And we're actually not a part of the University of Chicago. We're not an RSO. We didn't want the school to have any say over what we write or what we do. So we are, privately funded. We do our own thing, but at the same time, it's made up of just Chicago students. So I don't think we should have a problem of continuing.
That's awesome, and really inspiring too to hear that it's not necessarily connected to the university. So hopefully maybe other students with a variety of views around the country will sort of hear that message and be inspired to start something that's associated with their own school and students that they're connected to. I'd love to shift to some of your work on the COVID front. So you've written extensively on this issue and the impact of COVID policy and on college campuses at the Federalist. Could you talk about some of the more maybe egregious policies that you've come across and how you've seen student education and wellness impacted by those policies?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so one of the worst things for me, I think, is um, obviously being healthy and fit is what helps combat against COVID. You have a better chance of not having as many symptoms, of not being hospitalized or not dying. Students our age, we're not likely to die or be hospitalized, but it's still, you won't get as many symptoms if you're a healthy person. And what the university have done is, because they're trying to slow the spread, they've shut down gyms across the country. At our school, they haven't shut them down completely, but you can only go there for 50 minutes, and you have to sign up days in advance. So if you miss your time slot or you show up late, then you don't have as much time to go to the gym, which I think is not promoting a healthy lifestyle for students. But more scary than that is, I think, the snitch culture at U Chicago. So they have anonymous reporting systems. So actually, a lot of students that are part of our newspaper who have found themselves targets of the anonymous reporting system. So leftist students will go outside on the quad without masks, and they'll hang out. They'll even participate in destructive BLM riots that happened earlier in the school year in the fall. They burned had little fires on the quad, and I'm not sure if they were part of looting, but that did happen in Hyde Park. And at the same time, students at the Chicago Thinker who took a picture together wearing masks but not 6 feet apart were anonymously reported. And so that, because I mean, we're pretty sure that the reason is because they want to target students that they don't like. And so that's been happening. The snitch culture at some schools, they have cameras facing the dorms. This is not in Chicago, but at other schools they have cameras facing the dorm room, so that they can see that no two students are going into each other's rooms, because you're not allowed to go in. And you're not allowed to socialize with other people. You have to socially distance at all times. Many students that don't follow all the rules, whether it's not wearing a mask properly or it's not being socially distanced, have been kicked out of university housing or suspended from school entirely. They have tracking devices. So students have to, at UW-Madison, if you're not getting tested frequently, they'll keep track of it on the Badger app, is what they call it. Well, the Badger app, they say they're not tracking students, but a lot of people believe that they're able to check if there's a large cluster of students, which you're not supposed to have, by tracking how many apps are all together at the same time. So these are things that the school has been normalizing, and I've written about it before, but it's helping, it's teaching kids to tolerate this sort of toxic totalitarianism that you would see in a communist country, but now it's on college campuses. I've said it all the time that it's bad in Illinois, where there's a lot more regulations than maybe Florida, but nowhere is it worse than on college campuses, because the administrators and the bureaucrats who run the school are completely overblown and take away the rights and, in my opinion, civil liberties of a lot of the students of the students on campus.
I love what you just said on it might be bad in Illinois versus Florida or places like Texas where they're more open, but it's the worst on college campuses. I think that students around the country will really resonate with that, because even in states where it might be very open and seems free for the moment, you step on it to a college campus in those same cities and states and suddenly it's very locked down. So that's such a great point to make. Going off of that article, I believe that you were just touching on, at the Federalist, you have the recent article entitled "Universities' Insane COVID Rules and Snitch Culture Are Training the Next Generation to Embrace Totalitarianism." So you make a comparison in the article to the rebellious women of the feminist movement in the 60s. Could you kind of expand on how you see this comparison within the rebellious COVID culture and the rebellious feminist culture of those times, and sort of how you see those defiances impacting the COVID defiances impacting American culture in the future?
Yeah, so in the 60s, the left was the party of free speech and of freedom. So when women on college campuses in the 1960s and 50s, they had to sign in into their dorm rooms. They had curfews. If they wanted to leave campus during the school year, they had to get like a parental note. I mean, these are very sexist policies that didn't apply to men. They only applied to women. And so the feminist movement in the 1960s, left-wing students, left-wing feminist women fought to get the university administration out of their lives. They said, we want the freedom to go out as late as we want. We want the freedom to leave campus. We want the freedom to be the adults that we are. And now what we're seeing is the left-wing students on campus have made a switch, and now they want the administration to put on more rules and to have more regulations, because it's just been this great switch. And suddenly the conservative students who might have said, back in the day, we're fine with the curfew times and all that. Well, now the conservative students are saying we want the bureaucratic, overblown administration out of our lives. And part of the problem, part of why this is happening these days, is because at regular schools, especially like in Oxford and then back in the day, there were far more faculty than there were administrators. At every single school across the country, the administration is way overblown and outnumbers the faculty by triple or quadruple. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so that's why you have these people and their only job is to put rules on students and create diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that we don't need. I would prefer that my tuition go to my professors and not to these administrators whose only job is to make rules.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great comparison. I thought when I was reading through some of your work, I read that and thought, wow, I feel that anyone can relate to that, thinking about the triumphs of the women in the 60s and the differences on college campuses then and today, and how that really all compares. I feel like it puts it into a more digestible perspective. Yeah. So really great work on that article. I loved reading it. And maybe at the end we can plug where people can find more of your work. Sort of going off of that, we sort of mentioned how there's these left-leaning students who want more policy, these right-leaning students who want less policy. Where do you see, being a college student, where do you see these sort of apolitical or non-political or maybe more central students leaning on these policy areas regarding COVID?
Well, I think that a lot of them have been bullied into silence. If you're kind of on the fence, you're not sure what to think, you would never sympathize with the conservative standpoint, because the left wing, group on campus is so outspoken. And probably bigger than conservatives or sort of middle of the road students that you're just afraid. You're afraid you're going to get bullied. You're afraid you're going to get called out on Twitter or in the classroom. I've had things that I've said in class that might be controversial end up on Twitter. I mean, it's scary for people to speak out because they wield an outsized amount of power and they have no problem bullying other students. I've just maybe it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but women, feminist women, people who claim that they're feminists say we shouldn't bring down women. We have to build them up. We have to stand up for each other. And one on our Twitter hate account, the Chicago Thinker, my co-founder and I went on Fox and Friends. And if you look at the pinned tweet at the top, it's a picture of the two of us. And in the comments, it's all comments like talking about how ugly we are and like nitpicking all the things that are wrong with what we look like. But it's really hypocritical. And so, the rules of civility only apply to them. And not to people who differ. They want diversity of everything except for diversity of thought. And so I think that a lot of people who are in the middle of the road who might have questions are really bullied into silence and just, going along with whatever the left-wing narrative is because they're afraid.
Yeah, so with that and, looking for solutions against this sort of intimidation that we see from the left, how do we combat that? How do we make a shift in American culture so that those maybe middle of the road people don't feel so intimidated by one side or the other?
Well, you have to be vocal for one thing. So like that's what the Chicago Thinker does, is we're showcasing our ideas. But I think one of the biggest things that I think people maybe take for granted is standing up for each other. So when I was being canceled, I got so much hate publicly, but privately people would reach out to me and say, I can't say it on, I can't, say it in the comments on Facebook, but I can tell you that I agree with what you said, or even if I don't agree, I don't think this is right, that's happening to you. And I think it's really important if you see someone getting canceled, even if you don't agree with them, to reach out to them to make them feel like they're not alone. And if we can do that, if we can showcase conservative ideas, and if we can, show that you aren't going to get completely canceled, there are going to be people who are going to stand up for you, then you're going to inspire people to have more courage to say things that might be unpopular. But we definitely have a ways to go for that to be the new norm. I think that what happened to me last spring proves that there's some time, we have a ways to go, but I think that we can get there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's wonderful to see young women like yourself leading the pack. You and your co-founder are both such an inspiration to, like I said before, Americans around the country, because there are so many people who are afraid to speak up, and seeing people like you having the courage to do so is really inspiring. And I think more people are speaking up because of it. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Why don't you let our listeners know where they can see maybe some of your upcoming work or read some of your past articles?
So I write for both the Federalist and the Chicago Thinker. So you can go to thechicagothinker.com, and then you can obviously just go to the Federalist and you can search my name. And it will show all of my pieces there. And also you can follow me on Twitter, Evita Duffy _1.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we will have lots of listeners reading and catching up on some of your incredible work. It's awesome to see such intelligent and strong college women coming into the political realm like yourself. So do you have any last words of maybe hope or advice for the listeners? And we can go from there.
Stay strong, fight the good fight. They're not worth your time. If people are trying to cancel you or bully you, it's not worth it. Just ignore it and focus on the content of what you're trying to say and making your argument better. But bad faith arguments are not worth responding to or caring about.
I think that's a great note to end it on. So Evita, thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a pleasure discussing all these issues with you, and I can't wait to see where your work takes you from here.
Thanks so much for having me.